2025 wasn't just about smarter AI models. It was about an entire ecosystem evolving around us. From developers getting powerful new toolkits to tech giants making billion-dollar moves to industries being transformed overnight. I'm Sam Dave.
And I'm Mac Goswami. Welcome back to Inside AsembleAI, where we decode the AI revolution one insight at a time.
Mac, last episode, we talked about agentic AI and how models got smarter. But today, we are zooming out to look at the bigger picture, the explosion of AI toolkits that made this development accessible, the massive moves from big tech companies, and how AI actually transformed different industries in 2025. And honestly, it's been a while to watch. What do you think?
It really has, Sam. You know what struck me most about 2025? It was the velocity of innovation across the entire stack. Not just the models themselves, but the tooling, the infrastructure, the deployment patterns, the architecture. It felt like every week there was a new framework, new architecture, a new platform, a new way of building AI applications, not just LLMs.
Yeah, I know, right? It's been some time. I feel like it's like drinking from the fire hose. So let's start with the developer experience because that's where I think the most dramatic change happened in 2025. So, Mac, you have been building AI systems and working with engineering teams. So, when you look at the toolkit landscape of 2025, what are the breakthrough moments? I mean, what do you think that made AI development fundamentally easier and more accessible for the common users this year?
Great starting point, Sam. I think the biggest shift was the maturation of AI development platforms that abstracted away complexity without sacrificing power. At the start of 2025, if you wanted to build an AI application, you were writing a lot of code as well, handling API calls, managing prompts, dealing with rate limits, building error handling from scratch. Now we see a lot of improvements in mid 2025, where we had platforms like Vercel's AI SDK, LangChain.js. These are evolved significantly, and new entrants that made it possible to go from an idea to deployed AI app in hours instead of weeks. So the developer experience improved dramatically. You can focus on your application logic instead of just plumbing. So there are a lot of autonomous things that we have already implemented, like as I mentioned earlier, error handling, debugging. And I think the more years are coming by, the more months in the later phases, I think it will be more autonomous going forward.
Yeah, you brought up a great point, Mac, and it's definitely resonates with me as well. Because I remember spending days just setting up the infrastructure to call different LLM APIs reliably so I can build some agents. But by the end of 2025, I feel like that became a solved problem. But here's what I'm curious about. We saw this explosion of not just general AI platforms, but specialized toolkits for specific use cases. Things like vector database maturing. We have seen Pinecone or some other vector databases came out really rapidly. We've seen so many RAG frameworks becoming production ready, and observability tools for LLM application became mainstream. So, how do you think about that specialization? I mean, was it necessary? Did it add complexity? Or is it something that's more relevant for enterprise grade applications?
I think, Sam, first of all, it's a great question. And I think it was absolutely necessary, but it also did create a paradox. So we got more powerful tools and also more choices to make. So let me actually break it down what I experienced. So vector databases like Pinecone quadrant matured significantly. They went from interesting technology to production infrastructure with better performance, easier operations, real cost optimization. And I think that was very critical because RAG became the dominant pattern for building knowledge aware AI applications. Now, speaking of RAG, frameworks like, you know, advanced like LangChain made it much easier to build sophisticated retrieval systems. So, and in that way, you could handle complex document types, implement hybrid search, do contextual re-ranking, right? I mean, these are
Yeah.
extremely important that whenever you are trying to build an AI applications. And for observability, that is also huge because tools like Langsmith, weights and biases for LLM tracking, human loop, these made it possible to actually understand what your AI applications were actually doing in production. So you could see which prompts were working, where cost were spiking, that users were actually asking for, right? So I think there are significant improvement. Um, I mean, in terms of for different toolkits and also in the workflows as well, and in the agentic mode.
Yeah, I mean, that observability point is critical, Mac. And I think that was one of the most underrated developments of 2025. But that's where rubber meets the road. Because if I put my data science cap on, I mean, observability is required when you build a production grade application. If you're trying to put your agent into CI/CD pipeline, where you have to monitor any sort of data drift or conceptual drift, you have to have some sort of an observability and monitoring system on top of that AI layer. Because without visibility into that LLM behavior, we're going to fly blind here. But let me push you on something that with all these specialized tools, did it really create too much fragmentation? Or are developers now facing choice paralysis where they spend more time evaluating tools than building features? Because we are not trying to kind of like, looking for a nail. We already have the nail. We just have to figure out the best hammer to kind of hit on top of the nail. So what's your take on that?
You are actually touching a very real tension, Sam. So there is definitely some fragmentation and choice overload. And I have talked to my teams that spend weeks evaluating the vector databases and debating which LLM orchestration framework to use. But I think the market is consolidating around a few key patterns. Most teams are converging on similar stacks, a major LLM provider, a vector database for RAG, and orchestration frameworks like LangChain or uh, you know LlamaIndex, uh, an observability tool. So the choices are narrowing as best practices emerge. And having said that, what's your take on this, Sam? So you have been building systems across different domains as well. So did you feel the tool fragmentation was a help or it's hindrance in 2025?
Well, that's a great question. And honestly, Mac, it was both. Early in the year, the fragmentation was frustrating, to be honest with you. And I'm talking about 2025. Every project felt like starting from scratch, like researching tools, comparing options, making architectural decisions. But by late 2025, patterns solidified and the ecosystem matured enough that you could make confident choices quickly. What helped was the community sharing learnings openly because we are literally open sourcing all our AI agent toolkits or any softwares or even ideas. People writing about what worked, what did not, what to avoid. The collective knowledge compressed the learning curve significantly. And
Right.
that's what we kind of like talked about in our previous episode, that we have to be a part of that AI community. We have to learn from each other. So that's the best way we can make our systems better, by this collective decision making processes, which is going to grow us as a community, even in 2026. Now, Mac, let's shift to big tech, because that's where some of the most dramatic moves happened in 2025. We saw Google, Microsoft, Amazon Meta, all making massive investments and strategic plays. From your perspective, watching the industry closely, what are the defining moments? Which big tech moves actually mattered versus which were just noise?
That's actually the question that everyone was asking in 2025. So let me deep dive a little bit that, and I'll share my opinion. So starting with Google, they went all in on AI in a way that we hadn't seen before. Gemini 2.0's release in December was huge. But what mattered more was Google's integration strategy. They embedded AI deeply into the search, workspace, cloud. The Gemini API became genuinely competitive with OpenAI's offerings, and their pricing was very aggressive. They were clearly trying to capture market share. And if you see for Google, they are the only one like who are very close to OpenAI. So I feel like if OpenAI has more than 900 million customer base, Gemini is almost there. So they all are very aggressive nowadays. Microsoft doubled down on their OpenAI partnership, but also hedged their bets. They integrated AI across the entire Microsoft ecosystem. So you can see that in Windows, Office, Azure, GitHub. Copilot went from a feature to a platform. So, and their enterprise go to market was incredibly effective. And they converted their existing enterprise relationships into the AI relationships now. Now, again, Amazon played the infrastructure game. They made massive investment in AI chips.
Mhm.
Their Trainium and their Trainium offerings became legitimate alternatives to NVIDIA. Now, they focused also making AWS as a best place to deploy AI applications at scale. So less flashy than Google or Microsoft, but strategically very, very smart. So
Yeah.
I think they all are going very aggressive way, and I don't see any sign to stop near soon.
Yep. No, those are great observations. And speaking of the cheap war, like cheap manufacturing war, I think we also noticed that the Google kind of like ramped up their TPU chip processing game, so they can also have like a legitimate contest with NVIDIA's GPU. And I think they're slowly kind of like um, trying to move on to like a TPU infrastructure. So we will see how that pan out in future. Is NVIDIA GPU versus Google TPU. We see which one the AI builders will prefer in terms of the building an AI model or even doing their deep neural network work. Now, you missed one organization. What about Meta? Because I think Meta's strategy in 2025 was fascinating and maybe underappreciated. I mean, they went hard on open source with Llama 3 and subsequent releases, and that actually had ripple effects across the entire ecosystem. So, what's your take on Meta's strategy, AI strategy specifically in 2025?
You were absolutely right, Sam. Meta's open source strategy was one of the most impactful move of 2025. By releasing increasingly capable Llama models for free, they democratized access to frontier AI capabilities. Startups that couldn't afford OpenAI's pricing could build on Llama, and researchers could experiment without budget constraints. So entire ecosystems of fine-tuned models emerged. Now, strategically also, it made sense for Meta. They don't sell just AI models. They use AI to make their products better.
We've seen that with Meta glasses and some of the other AI related
Absolutely.
stuff. They're building their virtual world and all kind of stuff, right?
And also, they ensured that they wouldn't be locked into a competitor's ecosystem. Plus, the community innovations on Llama often, fed back into Meta's own products, like as you mentioned, their sunglass, right? Yeah, and I think there are more to see like this. I mean, same like Meta, then same for Google's as well, right? I
Yep.
mean, they both are strategic. They both are going very strategically, and especially there are a lot of opportunities right now, especially for researchers or even for the IT agencies like who want to build AI applications, right? So for them, I think it will be a game changer. Like if they can start using for Meta and then Gemini, because
Yeah.
they will get a lot of free stuff into it,
Yeah.
unlike OpenAI.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, there's a saying, commoditize your compliments. That's exactly what Meta was trying to do. And other big tech organizations also following the same suit. But here is what I'm actually mainly curious about. With all these big tech moves in their respective AI journeys, what happened to the startups? I mean, did they get crushed by the giants entering every space, or did the rising tide lift all boats? I mean, I know we're talking about 2025, but recently we got to know this news came out that the Manus, that one of the agentic AI organization bought by Meta. So is it like all the big whales are gonna eventually like swallow those smaller fishes in the ocean? What's your take on that?
So that's actually a multi-million dollar question. And since I am also attached with the startup world, and I think that, and I can answer it very strategically. So some of the startups definitely got squeezed. And if you were building a chatbot wrapper around GPT-4, you got commoditized. If you were building features that the big platforms but decided to bake in natively, you had a problem. So I would say that if a startups is going to be very successful, so there will be a high chance, like, they will be acquired at some point by the big techs,
Yep.
and the margin will be, and the margin will be very lower as compared to, couple of years back. So if a startup, like going for 4 or 5 years, 6, 7 run, and then the chances would be like, they will be acquired by the big four companies or other big tech giants, and with the big $1 billion money. Now what I'm seeing, like, startups company are being acquired in less years, like, 3, 4 years, and with less amount of money. So the valuations is actually getting lesser. And that big valuations, these kind of companies are, very rare nowadays.
Yeah.
So, and secondly is that many startups thrived by going deep on specific use cases or underserved markets. Companies building AI, healthcare, legal, finance, manufacturing, these specialized plays where domain expertise mattered were incredibly successful. So the big platforms provided the foundation, but there was a huge value in vertical integrations and domain knowledge. So I would say, the way I see it actually, that, if for startups, they want to be very niche down, very niche specific, and there will be very required specific domain knowledge, and, a specific skill set is needed for a specific industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right, and that makes sense. And also, there is a revenue factor we also have to take into consideration, especially when it comes to scalability. Some of the startups may not have that infrastructure or revenue strength to even partner with big organizations or even like helping them scale up their agentic infrastructure. And that's where big tech sees the opportunity to come in and probably acquire the startups using their technology, their methods, and kind of like making it as another business pitch to some of the larger organization of their customer base. So it's kind of like totally makes sense because at the end of the day, there's a saying, specialization and domain expertise as competitive moats. And which actually, aligns perfectly into what I want to talk about next, how AI transformed different industries in 2025. Because we just talked about customer base. So let's just dive into some of the industries that big tech or other AI startups supported throughout the year. In most of the cases, we've seen the high level moves from big tech are one thing, but the real impact is in how AI changed how work gets done in healthcare, finance, legal, manufacturing, and other sectors. So, Mac, let's go industry by industry. Let's start with healthcare. What did you see in healthcare in 2025? Like, what are the AI related changes that's kind of had a tremendous potential, but with also coming with the high risk and regulatory concerns? Will you be able to share some examples for our listeners?
Right. Healthcare was fascinating in 2025. We saw AI make real inroads in several areas, but always with appropriate guardrails and human oversight. Especially, that healthcare system is highly regulated. And in diagnostics, AI systems become valuable assistants for radiologists and pathologists. They could flag potential issues in imaging scans, suggest a differential diagnosis, surface relevant research. But critically, there were augmentation tools, not replacements. The physician made the final call. Anyways, in drug discovery, AI dramatically accelerated the early stages of the pipeline. Companies used AI to identify promising compounds, predict properties, optimize molecular structures. We saw several AI discovered drugs enter clinical trials in 2025. For clinical documentation, right? AI scribes became widespread. Now, physicians could have natural conversations with patients while AI captured notes, suggested diagnostic codes, identify follow-up items. And I think this was huge for reducing the physician burnout, improving patient interaction time. But the key theme across all these applications was augmentation with oversight, and healthcare is too high stakes
Yep.
for fully autonomous AI.
Especially because
So,
data it deals with. Those are very highly sensitive data, right?
right. And I think that, you know, if for researching purpose, they all need the data and that can easily be fit into it through AI, and then, they can come up to a phase that where we can predict those models, like what will be the behavior of the patients and all this stuff. But I still think that for surgical, anything related to surgical or anything to treat patients, something like that where human intervention is highly needed, that space I think we still need to improve a lot. Because and also it's a psychological thing, right? I mean, will the patients or will the human, they will accept that like they would be treated by an AI machine or AI system completely? I think the answer might no at this point, but I cannot predict that what it will be even
Yeah,
coming,
definitely. Yeah.
coming 5 years.
Keep an eye out on some of those regulatory concerns and how
Mhm.
AI is kind of finding its way and navigating through those adversities and still keeping the innovation lights on in that industry.
Right. And especially for the pharmaceutical, especially AI and healthcare, like they are complementing each other. But on the other side, if surgery or this kind of stuff is dependent on AI, we cannot, if anything goes wrong, we cannot reverse it back.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
in other sectors, if AI can go something wrong, that still can be fixable, that still
exactly.
can reverse. But in pharmaceutical and in the health sector, I mean, it is irreversible. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
I think
I mean,
it's challenging
you
for sure.
cannot let a robot operating on a human body, like we can't trust that. It's
Right.
not possible at all. So now, since you mentioned healthcare, I think it's kind of like resonates with my thought process with finance and fintech as well, because that is also another heavily regulated space. So let me share some of my viewpoints on that,
Uh-huh.
because finance is interesting because it's also both heavily regulated and highly quantitative, which sometimes makes it ideal for certain AI applications because there are thousands of use cases out there. But here's kind of like my perspectives, and I'm trying to break it down, especially in fraud detection and risk management, where AI systems become incredibly sophisticated. They could identify unusual patterns in real time, adapt to new fraud schemes, reduce false positives dramatically, and a lot of banks have started deploying AI, systems that could probably save billions in fraud losses while improving customer experience by reducing legitimate transactions becoming, incorrectly flagged. However, if you shift our focus to traditional portfolio management, there's also seen a lot of applicabilities of AI because there are some AI powered analysis became mainstream, not replacing human traders, but providing them with better insights in a quicker manner, like analyzing market sentiment from news and social media, identifying correlations humans might miss, or even like operating on or executing their back testing strategies rapidly. And I think a lot of traders may have some AI agents right now, which tells them, every minute or even seconds that where to put money in, and who knows, maybe New York Stock Exchange would have a lot of AI agents right now will build in future that's going to help them to operating some of these trading mechanisms more smoothly. And I guess in customer service also, we've seen a lot of financial institutions started deploying conversational AI that could handle routine inquiries, help with transaction and stuff. So
Yep.
I do see a lot of interesting areas where we can dive into in financial compliance reporting perspective, where AI can literally be useful that could monitor transactions for regulatory compliance, generate required reports and ensure adherence to complex rules, right?
Right.
This sometimes it may sound a little bit of like a sexy, but though are not, because though are actually
Right.
enormously valuable operational stuff in the financial regulatory and compliance world. And I feel like that's these are one of the main things about AI being more of like a mainstream systems within the financial and especially in the fintech world. And I know you had tons of background and professional experience in the fintech. Do you resonate with some of these points?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Awesome.
That what you mentioned already, like financial institutions deployed conversational AI, right? I mean, absolutely, and that can handle routine inquiries, and I can see that because initially what happened, like even for the risk and the fraud, that we had a team that we have actually delegates, right? I mean, their job is to monitor them, like from 9 to 5, right? And then after that there was a different shift, I mean, just to monitor the risk and frauds, all the tickets these are coming. Now at least we do not need any dedicated person, and we can simply get those tickets, production tickets, right? I mean, for the fraud and risk related stuff. But what we can't do is that just only based on the tickets that what we got through AI, but we cannot just simply fix them through the AI, because again, that could be a regulatory issue, right? Because for the fraudulent activity and the risk, just because let's say any scoring pattern, if that doesn't match, that that should match with some third party tool, like let's say FICO, right? So if it doesn't match, then we cannot just simply rely on the AI, because AI tool can even actually mislead us, right? And only due to that reasons we cannot fix an particular scoring problem. So for that we still need the human intervention. But even for for the trading, for the asset management, right? So for those, we can definitely, it is going to help about the pattern, because how someone can invest things, and what is the pattern that for the last year, and based on that what will be the pattern for the next year. That is okay, but still it cannot simply predict that where it is actually heading, right? Because eventually it's a human judgment
Yeah,
at
there'll
the
always
last.
be some sort of a ballpark or prediction range. It cannot
Right.
100% accurately predict anything. And we are also not going to let an AI to even like a push a trading button to, simulate something. It's always been
Absolutely.
highly regulated and a testing environment,
Yeah.
which can probably help traders to make a better trading decisions. But they're not going to be AI is not going to be the one, starting the trade or, making any financial
Yeah.
judgments on that.
Yeah. So eventually it again boils down to those points, like where are the high stakes
Correct.
decisions, and where are the critical decisions that are required, where we shouldn't use any kind of AI tools, or agents, or any kind of AI frameworks on that. Because we take that take that, like, just to see that what will be the predictive model. Rather than that, we should not completely rely on those.
Correct, correct. Now, moving on, I wanted to kind of skip a few other industries and want to focus on the industry that also being pretty much I would say impacted by AI. Like, for example, I could talk about marketing and customer experience, right? Because marketing and customer experience is something that's been pretty much, you know, went through a huge transformation in 2025. Like whether in content generation, like AI became kind of like a standard tool in the marketer's toolkit. I mean, not replacing the creative professionals, but augmenting them. Like AI could generate dozens of variations of ad copy for A/B or testing, create first drafts and those kind of stuff. Now, I kind of wanted to ask you, Mac, is that like let's say human creativity enhanced by AI scale and speed. And we've seen that how various toolkits like 11 Labs, Clean, Midjourney, and DAL-E coming up with their own AI generated images and videos. But what we've seen the pattern that across the industry is that what about the education? Because I saw some is interesting development there in 2025 where apart from the creative industry or from the financial space or legal space or even healthcare, I've seen odd like a spectrum of like a AI implementation education area, which we call it as an EdTech, nowadays. So what's your take on that EdTech concept? Is it something that you think beneficial for AI to step in and help the education system and make it more robust, synthesized, helping learners to learn stuff seamlessly? Just wanted to understand that because education is a complex scenario, you know.
Great observation, and I think great question as well. I think education is very complex, and I think it's the one of the especially for the kids,
Yeah,
and it's one of the and it's one of the foundation for the kid. Now, because the potential of AI is enormous, but so are the risk of over reliance or the misuse, for the AI in the education sector. So we need to clearly articulate. We need to clearly define the path, like what can be used through AI for education and what cannot be. For example, like when I see that, for the homeworks are coming for my daughter from the school, so we should limit our kids, like what extent they are going to use the AI tools to
correct.
solve those problems, right? Now, if they started even solving those, if they can simply run on a chat GPT, I mean they are going to solve the entire homeworks, just a matter of few minutes, right? So it's eventually some of the things as a parent we can control, some of the things we cannot control. So it also depends on the tutoring system as well, like for school or those the franchise, like who are doing science, mathematics, or even the online tutorial tools. So it's also them, like what extent that they are allowing their students to use the AI. I think to learn AI is good, but to solving a problem through I think that's kind of a questionable, because what was the context, and to what extent that they are be allowed for kids, and even like whoever is trying to learn something new, even some, I mean it could be even like applicable for you and me as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this academic integrity tension is real. Like, I think education is still figuring out how to adapt because we really don't want our kids to go in and kind of just, write an AI generated essay. I mean, they're going to miss that fundamental knowledge. I mean, they're not going to be able to flourish their creativity. I mean, at the end of the day, we still want human elements to be there. So
Correct.
I think we just really need to kind of like think about that our focus should be shifted from can you do this without AI to
Mhm.
can you use AI effectively and ethically to solve complex problems. I think that's the probably one of the biggest question that we need to answer, especially in the education world, as the kids started utilizing chat GPT and all kind of stuff.
Right.
And I know they're gonna do that. I know New York public schools, like, back in the days, they, you know, kind of like prevented their kids to use chat gpt and stuff, but I mean technology is something people will figure out a way to use that by hook or by crook, right? So I think it boils down to how we can morally obligated to reinforce some guardrails that will prevent users to use AI unethically, rather use AI to kind of amplify their creativity, not just replacing that totally, because human creativity that matters as well.
Absolutely. And having said, there are cases even the same applies for the universities as well, right? I mean, that someone is scientist,
Yeah.
and if he and she is in a project, think about what was happening 5 years back. They had to literally jot down all the research paperworks, data from different sources. They literally had to go in person, collect those data with a lot of research, a lot of mathematical, statistical calculations, all this stuff. If you see now, I think the entire 5 years research can be done probably, in a matter of couple of weeks. So it's again it's the researchers, and it is about those institutions, that in what extent that they are allowing, that they are the researchers, I mean, to use the AI, at what extent.
No, I think that's well said, Mac. But that's another thing we need to really think thoroughly, that how we gonna let AI to come in and help our researchers in a scientific research. I mean, we are not going. Science is a different thing. It's not like we're just pushing a button and doing something. It's about a discovery. So can AI really do the discovery? Because at this moment, AI is still kind of like a bunch of mathematical models running behind it and making prediction. It's not discovering something. So I think the scientific community is still hesitant to utilize AI. I mean, AI can definitely be helpful for running some of their tests or doing some experiments, but it's kind of like, I don't know how much there are reliance on AI at this moment in terms of running this research. So just to kind of wrap up, because we did talk about a lot of industrial industries here as a part of like AI implementation. Like we started with healthcare, then we talked about how AI can be benefited in the pharmaceutical area or marketing area or even finance and fintech. But we also talked about some of the guardrails that we need to kind of like cover. So having said that, just to kind of think about a little ahead in time, like because the skill set is evolving, it's no longer just knowing how to code or how to run a process or how we can write stuff, effectively with AI assistance. Now, if we zoom out for a moment, we talked about like all these toolkits, big tech moves, industry transformation. So, what are the overarching themes you saw in 2025? I mean, what's the big picture here if we try to combine all these AI revolution going on across the world and also some of the pitfalls and concerns shared by the users? I mean, what do you think about that? As we kind of like got into another year and we are excited to see what AI pans out in 2026.
So I think that the first question, the first point is that AI moved from experimentation to the production at scale. So what I experienced, like for 2025, it was more of experiment, like
Correct. Yeah.
how we are building LLM,
Uh-huh.
how we are creating an agentic workflow. Then next year would be, now we already did that 2025. Now it's to go for production. So of what we built already on 2025. So that's one of the thing, right?
Uh-huh.
Second thing is that the augmentation pattern won over the replacement narrative, right? So um, across every industry that we talked about already, healthcare, finance, education, creative work, the successful AI applications augmented the human expertise rather than replacing it, right? So that's the pattern that worked technically, economically, and also ethically. And lastly, I would say the ecosystem matured dramatically, that we moved from a wild west of experimentation to established patterns and production ready tools, best practices, and professional engineering. And the good thing is that even you can see that just for a normal household, he or she even started using AI.
Uh-huh.
Like they can create their own, creating their own human agent uh, regarding their behavior, their pattern of their lifestyles, everything. And that's actually a totally game-changing thing. So I would rather, I would see um, more households, like maybe, husbands, housewife, even grandparents, right? They would start using AI. They would start building AI applications going forward.
So it's like more of like you want to see that people from different age levels will start utilizing AI that can make their life better. I mean,
Right.
way for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really kind of like takes me to the next, like the fourth theme that I wanted to add is like the democratization of AI. Because at the end of the day, I mean, this is where we're heading that AI capabilities that were accessible not only to the large tech companies at the start of the year, but should be available to startups, individual developer, every students, and also every human being in their household by year end. I feel like we've seen that to some extent in 2025, but there is a long road ahead. And this democratization is important because it means innovation can come from anywhere and it can be
Right.
accessible by anyone. And you don't need a massive budget or a PhD to build valuable AI applications anymore because we can literally build an agent without having any programming background. I also want to highlight another trend is like the specialization trend. Like these general purpose AI platforms are valuable, but the real business value came from specialized applications that understood the domain context. Like that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where we can integrate AI to an existing enterprise workflows that can solve meaningful business problems, right? And I believe that trend will continue. So, what do you think about that?
Absolutely. And you know, I I would I would I would want to see it's a more of a continued consolidation,
Mhm.
in the toolkit ecosystem. For example, so right now, there are dozens of vector databases, right? Multiple orchestration frameworks,
Mhm.
but some consolidation is inevitable. That's one of the things, either through acquisitions or through market leaders.
Yep.
Again, I expect the multi-model trend to accelerate.
Mhm.
So 2025 was largely about text-based AI.
Correct.
2026, I think that we are heading more sophisticated integration of text,
Mhm.
image, video, audio. So applications that can understand and generate across modalities will become the new standard, right?
Yeah. That those are great predictions. Yeah.
Lastly, think that we will see edge AI and on device AI become more prominent, running models locally on phones, laptops, even IoT devices for privacy, latency, and cost reasons. So the infrastructure and models are getting good enough to make this practical. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, those are great predictions, but we also need to think about the AI regulations. And I feel like that's going to start to take shape more in 2026, especially some of the paralegal associates or AI legal associates listening to this conversation. They understand that it's just not that European Union, with their AI Act, but globally. I mean, US government came up with their AI action plan, and they're also trying to hone on some of the regulatory guardrails to put in place. And I feel like as we see the enterprise AI adoption accelerate dramatically, more guardrails, more legal compliance related stuff will put in place. And in terms of big tech, I think we will see more aggressive competition. That will never go away. It's already started. And as I mentioned, that Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google start kind of like fighting with each other for a lot of different AI toolkits. That's at the end of the day, it's just kind of like I feel like it's a deja vu of where we used to be back in early 2000s with the cloud. So the cloud war kind of like shifting towards an AI war between big techs, right?
Right.
I think that's where we are kind of
Right.
seeing. So this trends are worth watching, and I will highly recommend our listeners to please go to the comment section, and if you know some of the trends that we did not cover in this podcast episode, please feel free to drop your comments below that any other trends that we should follow that kind of like, came from 2025 and we're going to start shaping that trends to go for further in 2026. So going back to Mac, The competitive dynamics, especially when big tech companies compete aggressively, like we talked about a little bit, previously. So what we want to do is, like, before we wrap up this session, let's get practical for our listeners. We have talked about a lot of different tools, platform, industry trends, application, but for someone trying to stay current with this rapidly evolving ecosystem, what's your advice? How do our listeners avoid information overload while staying informed? Because there are lots going on right now. Tell them to stay relevant and focus on one thing, start small, and then scale up.
Yeah, so great question, Sam. And I would try to elaborate more. So the first thing is that even before starting anything small, I would highly, highly recommend to join a community. So any community where you will get great minds, you can talk to, you can share, you can exchange your ideas through AI application stuff. You will learn a lot of stuff. When I say community, it doesn't mean that you will have to get into each and every AI community. There are maybe hundreds of thousands of AI community around the world now. So you need to find out what is your niche, what is your industry, and and the community is based around it. Even though if you do not bother about like any kind of niche based community, you can absolutely go for a general community. That's totally fine. But still, you need to be involved with a community that where you can hang out some of the like-minded people, you know number one. Number two is that definitely subscribe to some of the newsletters. I would not say each and every AI, because nowadays thousands of newsletters probably like they are doing they are writing stuff for AI. I would suggest maybe one or two, maybe three max, to start a habit for reading the newsletter every day, even for 10-15 minutes each day, even as your spare time, either morning or lunchtime or maybe at dinner time. And then on a third step, based on that, you will get a lot of values from community, what they're doing from the newsletter, and what the other people are building, what they're getting out of it. Now start building a small thing. Let's say, this week, my job is to just to create a small agent. This week, just create a small profile, create a small, apply to a small use case, something like that. Then, learn things. You also need to learn the theoretical knowledge as well. Just do not go that, just go by the instructions that what is there. You also need to ask yourself that, before doing anything, that why am I doing this? And what is the purpose of it? And how it is going to help me? All this question, you need to answer. You need to first ask yourself, have some theoretical knowledge as well, and then go to the practical knowledge. Start small and then share it with everybody.
I think those are valuable insights, and thanks for those advice, Mag. And I'll add a few things. First, embrace JOMO, joy of missing out. You can't keep up with everything. There are lots going on in the AI world, and that's okay. Be selective about what you dive deep on. Just find your niche and just work on it. And the second is focus on problems, not solutions. I mean, instead of asking what's the latest AI tool, ask what problems am I trying to solve, right? Then we'll find the right tools for those specific problems. And I think that's where we kind of embrace the problem first approach rather than tool first thinking approach, right? And I guess the third point I would want like to make sure that people understand that we all need to learn from our failures and case studies. So try as many as use cases, AI use cases you could try. And it doesn't matter, it's going to fail or your output is totally different and your LLM is not even calling properly and your model is exhibiting hallucination. That's totally okay. But you will learn by doing that. You'll learn from your lessons and you're going to keep better in your AI journey. And finally, now I definitely recommend you guys to let's make sure that as you're part of the community, as you're doing all kind of stuff, as Mac mentioned, and I'd like mention that you have to start from small and then scale up, exponentially or slowly. But what I would definitely recommend our listeners that always try to take breaks because the AI field will still be there tomorrow, but don't get burnout by trying to keep up with everything at the same time.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, sustainable engagement beats unsustainable sprinting. So be a part of the community and try to make sure that you work at your own pace not trying to compare yourself to other in your AI journey.
Great points. Absolutely.
So just to kind of wrap up this, so Mac, like we covered a ton of ground today. Like we started with the explosion of AI toolkits and developer platforms, major strategic moves by the big techs, how AI transformed some of the well-known industries. So now, if you can tell me like what to watch out for in 2026 and like any final thoughts before we close out, Mac.
Yeah. And so 2025 was the year for AI that moved from technology experiment to business infrastructure. Now it became the part of how work gets done across every industry, right? So the tools are matured, the patterns are solidified, the value became undeniable. So we are not in the early days anymore with the AI. So we are now in the scaling phase. And and that's exciting because the real impact is just the beginning. So we witnessed an entire ecosystem evolve around us this year, from developers to enterprise to enter industries. So AI became woven into the fabric of how we work and create. So we would see a lot of improvements, especially on the scaling the LLMs, niche based LLMs that will be coming out, nor more autonomous agentic workflows. So these we all are going to see the year 2026. And also we would love to hear your experiences as well. So our listeners, you guys can tell us like what AI tools or applications made the biggest difference for you this year. What industry transformation surprised you the most? Reach out to us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or through our website at assembleai.com. Also subscribe to our newsletter, Assemble Inside AsembleAI, on Substacks. Also subscribe to our podcast as well. Thank you.
We'll definitely be back with more deep dives into AI innovation, practical implementation strategies, and conversation with leaders building the future. Until then, keep experimenting, keep learning, and keep building. Thanks for listening, everyone, and Happy New Year once again from me and